Hello and welcome to today's discussion that is part of ISLA's 2021 Securities Finance Forum. My name is Andy Dyson, and as Chief Executive of ISLA, I'm lucky enough at times to get to talk to people who've played an integral part in the development of the industry that we all live in, work in today. And today is one of those occasions, and I'm absolutely delighted to be talking to Brian Lamb, Chief Executive at EquiLend. Frankly, if any of you watching don't already know who Brian is or what EquiLend does, you've probably logged into the wrong conference. But putting that on one side, just a tiny bit of background about Brian before we get going. So Brian, as Chief Executive, is responsible for all global operations of EquiLend, its affiliates and subscribers. He brings 30 years of hands-on experience and a deep knowledge of the global securities finance industry with an emphasis on technology solutions, as you would expect. Prior to joining EquiLend, Brian spent 17 years with Barclays Global Investors, and for those of you with long memories, you probably recall them as BGI. While at BGI, Brian held various positions, including head of global derivative services and cash strategist. Brian spent many years in securities finance while at BGI. His role in that area ranged from product manager for fixed income securities lending, as well as program manager and alternative board member for EquiLend. He is one of the thought leaders amongst the initial ownership group that helped design the EquiLend platform that many of you use today. Brian is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame and holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration with a concentration on finance. Consequently, Brian's experience and his background means that obviously not only is he pivotal to what many of you do when looking at EquiLend, but ideally placed to talk a little bit about the industry and where we are today. So Brian, once again, welcome. Let's get right to the first question. So Brian, you were one of the original architects of EquiLend back in 2000, and you returned in 2005 to become Chief Executive. Perhaps as a start-off point, you could describe EquiLend and the environment it was operating in those early years and how things have evolved to where we are today.
Well, thank you, Andy. It's a pleasure to be with you here today, and it's an honor to be part of the ISLA conference this year. So thank you so much for inviting me and for the remarks that you made. Well, certainly it's hard to believe it's been 21 years since the formation of EquiLend. And there's been a lot of water under the bridge, as they say. It's hard to believe that it's been 20 years on top of the 17 years that I had at BGI. Time just flies by. It's incredible. Certainly EquiLend is a very different place today than it was when I joined as CEO in 2005. Not only was our footprint much smaller in terms of our size, in terms of our people, in terms of our office footprint and global reach, but the market was also very different. It was pre-financial crisis, really on the precipice of the financial crisis. And so the world was very different back in 2005. At the time, EquiLend was much smaller. I think we had about 25 employees globally. I think we had one person in London and nobody in Asia. So now it's much different. We've got 40 people in London. We've got a dozen in Asia between Japan and Hong Kong, and quite a few people in North America. Not only that, though, but our reach and our connectivity to clients was much different. So when I joined, I think we had 13 clients, including our original 10 founders. And now we've got upwards of 200 clients, depending on which products they're subscribing to. So it's a much different environment, and it's an exciting time. It's been an exciting journey. But it's even more exciting now because of where we are with regard to various technologies and the evolution of our industry, and a lot of changes that have happened. And I think people like yourself, Andy, deserve a lot of credit in terms of championing, a lot of regulatory change that we've seen, as part of ISLA and other associations in our industry. And, I would applaud the work that you all do in helping us to really stay in tune and on top of, the changes that the regulators continue to throw at us. So, thank you for that. But
Uh,
it's a much different world today than it was 15, 16 years ago.
and Brian, thanks for that introductory comment. And we will come back to the idea of what you think happening in the future. Got a couple of points I want to get to, but I think it would be remiss of us not to touch upon the pandemic. Um, but in a single moment, and I remember those days quite well, sort of beginning part of last year, the world changed around us, and the impact on everyone was immense, including our industry. We saw market turbulence in the early days. I think you guys must have seen huge spikes in volumes going through your systems at that time, but also there was the sudden move towards remote working arrangements. If you remember, Brian, there were many things that regulators said you could never do at home, and within a day, everybody was doing them at home. So I just wondered how EquiLend responded to the pandemic, and most importantly, what do you think are the lasting changes, that we see today? And maybe just framing that, I noticed that EquiLend, has I think done pretty well in winning awards from being quite a nice place to work. So just to think about what changes do you think we're going to see that we will see from the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a great question, Andy. Thank you. You know, uh, what can we say? I mean, it's it's been 18 plus months of just unprecedented environment for our world, for our lives, personal and professional, and it will have a lasting impact. I think it's already changed all of us, and it'll continue to have an impact and change us as we move forward. One of the interesting things to me about from a professional perspective is we've always had fully autonomous trading, and people have sometimes a hard time wrapping their brain around what that really means. What does fully autonomous means? Well, it means basically that the computers do all the work, um, and we've had that with our Autobar platform for 20 years. We re-engineered it, 6 or 7 years ago, and we call it next generation trading, or NGT, which made it actually even more fully autonomous. So one of the things that I was struck by at the start of the pandemic was I would get calls from clients, and they would say, "Wow, we're so grateful that the trading platform still works, because we've been displaced. We couldn't come to the office, and we couldn't run the same programs and algorithms that we would run from our desk in the office, and we didn't fully appreciate that they would run anyway." And for some firms, it took them days or even weeks, because everybody reverted to their business resumption site. Well, that proved to not be the best model, because it just concentrated people in probably a
Mm.
smaller space than they would have been in the office, and that doesn't work with a pandemic like we just went through. So we all learned
And
that.
Brian, it seems to me that those disaster recovery plans were designed more to do with things like large explosions and that type of pandemic, or extreme weather, rather than a virus.
Exactly. And, how do you know? Nobody can
Mm.
predict the future. And so it was interesting, for those people that ended up getting distributed back to their homes, basically. I'm in my home office right now, in fact. We are back to the office for vaccinated people, but and I'm there, probably 3 days a week now. Um, but a lot of people are still at home, and so and that works. And I guess my point on the fully autonomous is just that people, our clients, didn't fully appreciate how fully autonomous our trading was. And it still worked, even though it took them days or weeks to get on their feet again. The trading was still happening. In fact, if you remember at the time, the market volatility was through the roof and the
Yeah.
markets were selling off. And so there's a strong correlation between market volatility and securities finance flow. And so our highest trading days of all time happened just as the pandemic was really, it was mid-March, thereabouts,
Yeah.
when we closed all the offices, March 16th. But it's had an impact, and to your question about EquiLend, and we've gotten awards, and we have, and we're very grateful for that. We're very grateful to be recognized. We have a very strong culture. Um, People come to EquiLend and they tend to stay here for a long time.
Hmm.
We fortunately, touch wood, haven't had a lot of turnover. Um, and we're really blessed to have some really great people. And it's a bit cliche to say people are our greatest asset, but they really are. And particularly because they're here for an extended period of time, and so they have their they bring their expertise to the company, and then they share it with their fellow colleagues, and that just creates a more rich environment. We're also blessed to have quite a diverse group of people, and our diversity and inclusion committee is very active within the EquiLend community, and I'm very proud of the fact that we have a very diverse group of people at EquiLend, and it's a real focus for the company. Always has been, but especially now when you have a lot of the ESG activities that you're involved in, that we're involved in. It's very important. It's very important that we not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And I'm proud of what we've done there.
So, so Brian, that's an interesting point to maybe just pause there, because what we found is that the diversity inclusion discussions have moved on, and there is a panel later on in the day when this is broadcast where we look at that. In the context of your business and the market, and I'm conscious of time. I know that was a big area you wanted to get to, which was sort of building around your tagline is innovation, your advantage, our innovation, your advantage. So clearly, innovation's been at the heart of what you do and has been for 20 years. So I'd be quite interested to get your thoughts on, what are the sort of trends you're seeing that are going to impact the market. We see recently we've seen some consolidation going on. We saw the announcement that State Street, for example, had purchased the security service business of BBH. And I think, when I sat down with you in London a few weeks ago, I think we were talking about the sheer number of vendors in the space. So what do you think is going to go? What's going to happen next? And where do you feel your focus is going to be as a business?
It's a great question. We believe strongly that our innovation is the advantage of our clients, and our clients come first and foremost, and their needs are paramount in what we do. And just to wrap up the pandemic related topic, just what we did with our clients was, because they were all distributed, and all of a sudden they may not have had access from home that they would have had at the office. So we broadened the access for everybody. We made it free, in fact,
Okay.
in order for them to do what they needed to do. It's really important, particularly now in 2021, on the verge of 2022, to really transform our industry. What we did with trading and NGT and making things fully autonomous, we need to do that for the rest of the ecosystem. And we need to balance the commercial interests of firms like EquiLend with the needs of the industry. And so what that really means is we're going to need to come up with a model that suits everyone, all vendors, all participants, and make things much, much more open. Because the technology that we all experience in our personal lives is much better, candidly, than much of the technology that we see in this industry. And the
Agreed.
technology we see in this industry, it's really stuck in a place many years back, and everyone has their own, which makes it really difficult to standardize. But you and I spoke over lunch last month in London, and I know Isla's done a lot with regard to standardization, and so have we. 20 years ago we came up with standards, and that's really the way forward. You know, it's not necessarily the technology itself. It's not the tail wagging the dog. We have to figure out what the right solution is, proof of concept, and then ask ourselves, is that blockchain? Is
Mm.
that distributed ledger? Is that something else? I don't
And,
know, is the honest answer.
and Brian, quick question on that. Where do you see that initiative has to come from? Because you know as well as I do that I talk about this a lot, and where's that spark got to come from to get that momentum?
You know, I'm not sure. I mean, with the financial crisis, that was a bit of a spark because what everyone had to do at the time was run the same amount of business with a lot less people. So there's not that many ways to do that.
Mm.
Technology is a solution to that. So that was a bit of a spark then. I see there's a bit of a spark on the horizon in the fact that I expect there to be considerable consolidation in this industry, and not just on the client side, not just with State Street buying BBH, but on the technology side, on the vendor side. So it'll be consolidation and collaboration. It has to be. And I think we'll definitely see more people recognize that as a solution that they want to be a part of. We already see the need for people to cut expense, and if you're going to continue to cut expense, you're going to need more innovation and greater technology solutions to really help to fill the gap.
And obviously, Brian, I completely agree with you. And I think that we also see that need. I think we've all talked in the past about, if you like, overlaying new solutions on increasingly antiquated foundations. And surely there comes a point where you just can't do that anymore, can you?
You can't. You really can't. You know, it's lipstick on a pig, quite frankly. So but I'm hopeful. I really see that there's not just a desire, but there's a real momentum in the marketplace. And I think, a lot of the buzz around new technologies like blockchain is probably useful. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to adopt blockchain. We might, but it's useful in that it's a catalyst for us to discuss better technology solutions and better collaboration across the entire global industry, because this is absolutely a global industry and we need to operate that way.
Okay, Brian, listen, I'm conscious of time. We've only got a couple of minutes left. And just to conclude, what will be the key message you would give as the chief executive of EquiLend when you're talking to, the market, your stakeholders, your clients? What will be the key message for the coming sort of months and years from your perspective? Is it that technology shift we need to see?
Well, I would start with hopefully post-pandemic environment, and I would just say, I'm hopeful, and I think we should all be hopeful, as we move forward, that we can operate in a new normal. I hate to use that expression, but I think we'll always have a combination of in-person and remote. At EquiLend, we have a flex plan where we're going to give every employee 100 days a year to work remotely. They can use that in one block or in 100 blocks. Just work it out with your manager. And then, on the heels of that, I think I would really encourage everyone to focus on supporting transformation in a significant way, and not just with their own technologies, but really reach out to the industry and their counterparts to really come up with solutions that are transformative, that are really going to enable this industry to flourish and prosper as it has for many years.
And final word, because we've got about 30 seconds. You fundamentally believe, I think, from what you're saying, that the industry has a future, but we just need to think about it in a different way.
Absolutely. We have a very strong future, and we're a very important part of this marketplace, and we will continue to be for many years to come. It just needs to operate more efficiently.
Brian, I'm afraid we're going to have to conclude there. Fascinating insights from you. Once again, I'd like to thank you for your time and participation, and of course, for the work you do on behalf of the industry through the EquiLend platform. Much more to come. And obviously, for those of you who want to learn a bit more about EquiLend, they've got a super website. And obviously, I'd like to thank Brian while he's here for being one of our sponsors for this event over the 2 days. So, Brian, I think we have to conclude there, but many thanks.
Thank you, Andy. Cheers.